Okay, some more about the box model. You've heard about this a couple times and should have read about it by now. It's a bit of an abstract idea. Why do you care about padding and border and margin? But once we move into floating things and layout, that becomes really important. But even at the level of a single page with just text, headings and paragraphs and lists, we need the box model to move things around slightly here and there for better alignment and keeping the things that go together, keeping them together, and the things that don't go together, keep them further apart. So as an introduction, remember that every element is in a box. Everything, inline elements, block elements, grouping and sectioning elements. We're really concerned about the block and the grouping and sectioning elements though. We don't usually see these boxes, that's okay, but we have to understand them to move them around. The content would be either an image, some text, or maybe a whole bunch of stuff, images and text together in a div or some other sectioning element. Then around that is the padding, which is the space between the content and the border. The border is often invisible. It's optional. It always should be considered to be there, though. It may have a size of 0 unless you give it some size, and it needs size and color and style. And the margin is the area outside the border. Margins are really commonly used, especially on the whole page, to give it what we think of as margins, like margins on a piece of paper. So you need to know these terms and get a feel for where they are and how they work. We're going to do an exercise a little later in the box model that will help you actually use this stuff. Controlling the box. We can control the size, padding, and border and margins, right? The most common units are px, em, percentages. Pixels, ems are like size based on text, and percentages, that makes it flexible. Either size of the box or padding or margin so that it flexes as the page size changes. Padding, border, and margins can be controlled individually. For instance, in this example, a paragraph with an ID of intro, I can control the padding on the top, can be different from the padding on the right, different from the padding on the bottom, different from the padding on the left. Remember, as always, no space between the number and the units. Controlling the box again, usually we use the shorthand properties for padding and margin. This is padding and margin. We are controlled by the TRBL, or you can remember trouble, which is top, right, bottom, left, is the order we control these things. Clockwise from the top, 4 values are given. Or we can use 3, then it's just the top, left, right, and bottom. Or we can use the 2, which is the top, bottom, left, right, and then 1 is all. For instance, that paragraph with an ID of intro, I can give the margin on all the sides together in one list like this. So it would be TRBL, top, right, bottom, left. Or I can go to the 3 units, which is top, right, left, and bottom. See, there's no commas between these. I can just give 2, which is pretty common really, that the top and bottom are the same and the left and the right are the same. And of course these could all be in some other units too, like EMs or percents, or a combination of those things. And I could just give 1 number, which means they're all the same. The margin all the way around is the same. And padding works the same way. Again, here's an example. Many pages start by setting overall margin and percentages on the body, or you might have inside the body another big div that encompasses the entire page. And if we say 0, 15, 0, that means 0 for the top and bottom. For this case, sorry, for the top, 15 for the left and right, 0 for the bottom. Or we could have just written 0 and 15. Would work the same way. 15%. So that would be 15% of the page is the margins left and right. Okay, now we need to know the sizes of boxes. sometimes, especially boxes with text, because they don't come with any size automatically. If you want to center something, for instance, or maybe move it around, it has to have a size. If we want to set those sizes in hard units, it's usually pixels. But we have to know when we're putting those numbers together, what is the visible actual box, and then what about the padding and the border and the margins, and how those things go together to actually equal the size of the box. So we're often trying to figure out the size of a box. And there are actually two methods for sizing boxes. You should read about these in your text. It's important to know. I know it's a little bit, again, a little abstract, but we'll do an exercise with them a little later too. But try to understand this idea that this default content method. How wide is this box? Well, it's got a width of 500 pixels. Is that the width of the box? No, it is not. Because the box, the visible box, is 500 plus the padding. I'm talking about the width of the box now. How wide is the box? 500 plus the padding of 20 on either side, plus the border of 2 on either side. So the visible box is actually 544 pixels wide. Or I could talk about the total size of the element, which includes the margins, which is another 20 pixels on either side. So with the margins, the total size of the element is 584 pixels. Now, if I was expecting a box of 500 pixels, and I needed that size because other things were going beside it of certain sizes, and I only had a certain amount of width on my page, then I would have a problem here if I didn't count these other things that go into the size of the box. Now, some people don't like that idea. So they developed another box sizing method. And to make it work, we have to use these codes first. This is your first look, except in the textbook, I think you may have seen these, what we call vendor codes. What this says is that for the different browsers, it tells them we have to have specific codes. All of a sudden, the universal idea of HTML and CSS starts to break down a little bit, because the border box method of box sizing, we have to tell individual browser types to use this method. And this is how we do it. So if we give a background color, that's of course not really part of this, just as a background color. How wide is something with the border box method? If we say the width is 500 and the padding and the border and the margin, doesn't matter. The visible box is 500, and inside there is the border. Inside there is the padding. And then finally inside that is our content for the width. Or if we want, margin is still added on the outside for the total element. Okay, borders. Borders are handled a little differently. They're not the same as padding and margin. For borders, we can give a style, of which there's a number of styles. We could just style a top border. We can give a width for all the borders. We can just give a width to one side. We can use color, border color. We can give border color to just one side, like border bottom. And there's a border shorthand, as there is for margin and for padding, but it doesn't use the TRBL system. And you can change the order, no commas. It can apply to all sides, all valid sides. So if I say border left, red, 3M solid, or if I write it solid, 3M red, or if I don't use red, if I use a hex code, or I could use a RGB code, right? It will make the left side of the border on this element solid, 3M wide, and red. I can say border bottom, 1px dotted. Okay, yeah, and it will be that way. Default is black. Or I can give a border of all the sides of 2px, 2 pixels, dashed, and then this color. And by the way, there should be a semicolon there. Forgot that. Semicolon without the semicolons, things won't work. Okay, margins. I don't think you can quite see the bottom of this page, probably. Let me try to make it different here. All right, that's maybe a little better. Maybe. Okay. All right, so margins are very important in layout. They push boxes around. We can use specific margins like margin top, margin left, and so on. Again, in pixels, percentages, or EMs. Or we can use negative margins to make things go closer. So negative margins like pull things around. Collapsing margins. All right, we have to talk about this. Imagine two items, heading in H1 and H2, for instance. And they each have margins. Margin bottom on the H1 is certain size, pixels, 20 pixels. Margin, actually I'll use this example right here. The biggest, so if one element has a bottom margin of 4 pixels and the element below it has a top margin of 2 pixels, they don't add up. It doesn't become 6. The space between them is 4 pixels, not 2 pixels, not 6 pixels, 4 pixels. So in margins, when two margins come in contact with each other, the biggest margin wins and the other one goes to 0. So this is called collapsing margins. And it can be a reason that you're not getting all the effective margins that you were expecting in your elements. And display, we'll throw this in here. With the display command, you can change the way an element is displayed. The common values are inline, block, or none. There's actually others. So display none would make something disappear. And you might do that if you wanted it to be on the page for SEO, but you don't want it to be visible. And we'll come up with some examples of that when we do banners. Why would you want to display as inline or block, though? Navigation lists, to make some of the is an example where we often use display, because all of a sudden we're taking a list of things and displaying it as block items, or the other way around. So we can change the display of things. And there's a display examples on your pages. I suggest you go look at that for more about display.